Welcome to the Inventory Nation podcast, a show designed to bring you the incredible voices and stories of veterinary professionals coast to coast, all while helping you to manage and control your inventory. I'm your host, Nicole Clausen, coach, advisor, and champion for veterinary teams and their inventory. Joining you live from the mountains of Montana, welcome to the show. Hello, welcome back to the Inventory Nation podcast. As always, I am so excited that you're here. So today is going to be an extra juicy episode. So as you probably know, controlled substances are an aspect of managing a practice that's often clouded in mystery, uncertainty, and a whole lot of questions. So today is going to be a very special episode where our guest and I will be clearing the air and shedding some light on some common controlled substance myths and tall tales. So in this episode, I'm absolutely delighted to introduce you to my very dear friend, Jack Teitelman, the CEO of Titan Group. Jack has more than 3 decades of continuous leadership expertise in government, security, law enforcement, and private industry. For over 26 years, he worked for the Department of Justice and the Drug Enforcement Administration as a special agent and supervisory special agent, gaining extensive experience in all facets of complex criminal drug conspiracy investigations. He received numerous awards and commendations. He is now the CEO and founder of Titan Group, and he is today's guest expert. Welcome to the show, Jack. I'm so glad to have you here.
You. Wow. I mean, you say all that stuff and it does, I don't know if that's all true. Wow, man. No, but thank you so much. And, just for everybody out there, Nicole, we met, at least about 5 years ago, and truly I will tell everybody you are, one of the smartest people I've met in the vet world. Your intelligence, you've made me very happy to meet you and call you my friend. So, and I'm so glad you brought me on. Thank you.
Thank you. That means a lot to me. So tell us your story. How did you get started as a DEA compliance expert in vet med? Like, how did that all go down?
Wow. So, spending 26 years as a DEA agent and then getting near the end of my career and wondering what I was going to do. And it just so happened we're in the middle of an opioid epidemic, right? And I had worked several heroin pill cases that got me involved in this world. And that's when a good friend of mine was like, you should think about starting your own little compliance company when you retire and go out and work with doctors and pharmacists and notice he never said veterinarian, right? So I'm all excited. And we had an old dog at the time and my vet would come to the house. And it just so happened that she came and she's like, hey, what are you doing now that you're retiring? And I'm telling her all this exciting stuff. And she goes, what about us? She's like, us veterinarians. She's like, we don't get any training. When it comes to the DEA stuff, I'm telling, she goes, nobody out there knows what they're doing. And then all we're counting on is just, is word of mouth and maybe bad habits passed down from somebody to somebody. So she opened my eyes to it, and that turned into my, doing her clinic. And next thing I know, 9 of her friends were at the clinic that showed up and just came over. And so that's kind of how it started. My very first client was a veterinarian. And of course, we're everywhere. I mean, we're, like I said before, we're working in every vertical and every industry out there. But that's how, how I started in the vet world and then found out really quick that doing DEA compliance in the veterinary, call it, the industry is completely different than doing it on the human side. Mm-hmm. We've worked together on this stuff. And so, it's different. You guys, call things different. For a DEA person to come into the vet world and only worked in a CVS pharmacy, they're not going to understand where they're at, right?
Yeah.
So, that's kind of, that's the little story about how we got started, and now 6 years later, and probably close to 300 vet hospitals. not much under the sun with DEA compliance that we haven't seen in the vet world.
Yeah. And it's so important, I think, the work that you're doing because, so I've been in vet med for like over 15 years and literally like, I didn't know that a biannual inventory count was a thing until like I was like literally had been in this field for like 6 years. And I was like, wait, we have to do what? So I feel like
Yeah.
it's just so important that the work that you're doing and kind of like dispelling those bad habits and wait a second, no, here's the actual information.
Yes. And I was giving a seminar, a couple of days ago to about 50 veterinarians in upstate New York. And I always start every one of my talks with everybody that's done a biennial inventory in the last 2 years, put your hand up. Not one person put their hand up. So, right there, you are, if you're not doing cycle counts, if you're not doing any counts at all, you're going to fail your DEA, or state inspection right from the get-go because you haven't done that one little thing.
Yeah.
That one thing. And it's truly a problem because but I mean I go everywhere and I mean I put a flag up, say do your biennial inventory. You got to everyone do your biennial inventory. And and that's that becomes the homework assignment for everyone. After I say that, go do it because it's going to come back to haunt you.
Yeah.
It really will.
Yeah. So if you're listening, if you haven't done that, do it right now. Pause this episode, go do it.
It's your homework assignment as soon as you leave.
So before we kind of dive into some myths that we hear often, what do you think just is kind of like the craziest thing that you've ever heard or experienced regarding controlled substance and vet med? Like, give us a wild story.
Wow. Well, and I've had a few. So I guess when it comes to ordering, I've had several vets that were convinced they did not have to do any paperwork. That logbooks that they were told that they were no longer needed. And you walk in and you're like, well, can you show me that teletype, or did something come out from DEA recently that I don't know, because I guess I'm out of business if we're not doing record keeping anymore. Right. So and that's been more than once that I've been to a location and asked for the logbooks, and I got to look like, well, the computer's doing it for us, right? I mean, we don't. And I'm like, well, I don't know, maybe it is. I don't know, what kind of, do you have a Cubex? Do you have like an Omnicell, or are you using some, something other than just, hoping that it's doing it for you somewhere within some computer system?
Right. It's doing it in the cloud.
Yeah. So, I've had several times, I have to do what, so those are kind of, remember when, for anyone who's a doctor out there who's a veterinarian, when you get your DEA registration, that's a contract, right? You've signed a contract with the government saying that I understand every part of DEA compliance from soup to nuts, from the beginning to end. And now I understand what this awesome responsibility it is to buy and purchase and store and dispense and administer all these drugs. But obviously, some of these people didn't take the test or study for the test. So, and one of these was not an older doctor. Like I would say, oh, some 80-year-old doctor or some country doctor. Okay, I can understand that person not, thinking, but a brand new veterinarian, less than under 30 years old telling me this, that one kind of blew me away.
Yeah.
So I could go on and on with the crazy stories of what's happening inside the vet clinics, but we'll leave that to everyone's imagination, because they've all been there.
Yeah,
and I'm sure that they can probably tell me stories that would blow my mind too. But
totally. So let's dive into some myths. So first and foremost, can mixtures like Kitty Magic or TKX be made? So can you make mixtures of controlled substances, and then do you need to log them, or like what's, how do you go about that process?
So yes, you can make those mixtures. You're making a compound if you really think about it. But Kitty Magic and TDX or TDK, if you're making it patient specific, then it doesn't have to have its own log, right? It's, ketamine came out of its ketamine log, this came out of this log, and it's out, and we make it up and put it in a shot and we use it. But if you are in one of our big equine hospitals down in Tennessee, who's making giant bags of, ketamine mixtures because they're going to do a bunch of horse, procedures, that's a new compound. That's a new mixture. We will then create a new logbook for that, work it all the way down, and then, one log page for it. And then that goes into, its own separate, binder. So, you just have to be careful that, if you're going to make a giant pile up and use for a whole bunch of stuff, you've created a new compound for multi-use, and it really should be tracked that way.
Yes.
If that makes sense, right?
It does, yeah. So it's definitely allowed to make the mixture, but depending on if it's like you're making a mixture for one patient or if you're making a mixture for multiple patients, it kind of should be logged, appropriately depending on how you're using it.
Correct.
Okay. So then another one that I hear a lot is, should everyone have their own DEA license and order their own drugs? So each veterinarian has their own license and their own set of drugs.
There is one company out there that loves to do that, right? And I think it's Banfield, or something that sounds like Banfield. I think it's a logistical nightmare. Because you now have, let's just say you've got 10 doctors. And we went down and this happened to us in Texas, where a company decided that was the right way to go, except they were all using the same storage. So the drugs were getting mixed up. And inevitably they got mixed up. And they all decided that, well, why can't we just use the same logbooks? And then so before you knew it, they had 10 different drug inventories that got all mixed up together in one safe. And the record keeping they were trying, and I was like, you guys have just destroyed what would have been the individuality of this, by going backwards to the way it was before. They kept trying to go back to the way it was before because that felt normal to them, right? Mm-hmm. And it felt right, which is the correct way to do it. Because you'll run into those issues. And then you'll also run into issues where one doctor's like, hey man, I'm out of euthanasia. I'm out of can I get somebody here? And then they start transferring amongst each other with no paperwork. You see how that can go. And, because it doesn't matter if you're a doctor with a registration number. And back to your first question, everyone, if you're a vet, you should have a DEA registration. Because the Vet Mobility Act was written specifically for veterinarians, not for veterinary technicians, not for nurses, or not for anesthesiologists, because anesthesiologists tried to get away with taking all their drugs from their hospital and then going all throughout the city with all their drugs doing vet medicine. You can't do if you want to do that as a human doctor. You have to have a DEA registration at every single location you're going to work at. And you have to have your a stock of drugs at every single. So if you're an anesthesiologist going to work at those ambulatory surgical centers, of course, they want to take their black bag of propofol and everything and just go from 1 to 1 to 1. But that's a true case, by the way. That actually, they tried to jump on the bandwagon saying that, well, the veterinarians can do it, right? And they're like, did you go to vet school? No, I went to medical school. So then you can't do that.
Yeah.
So that was, So if you're a vet, definitely you should have a DEA registration. And if you think you want to run a practice with 10 different DEA numbers, 10 different drug inventories, 10 different sets of record keeping, that means 10 different biennials, which are going to be done on all different days, right? So yeah, totally. It doesn't work well for every place that I've been in. And the other thing I'll throw out there is liability. So anyone, if you're out there and you work for a corporation and they want to use your DEA number because you want to be the registrant, who's going to get in trouble when the crap hits the fan? You are the registrant, right? Not ABC Corporation, at least not right off the bat.
Yeah.
That'll come later once DEA realizes that you work for a big corporation. And then they're going to start knocking at, some of the other doors. But so that, yeah, so it's certainly, I'm not a fan of doing it that way.
Yeah, that just sounds like, I mean, one set of logbooks and one set of drugs is kind of a logistical mess sometimes. So I cannot
Yeah.
even imagine extrapolating that to every doctor having their own set of drugs, their own set of logs, their own set of invoices, and just, yeah, sounds.
Right. I mean, so yeah, you just described, the whole. It just be, and imagine if every one of them was ordering Schedule 2s.
I don't even want to think about it. I need an
Yeah,
Advil just to think about that
another
question.
layer of craziness. So.
Yes.
All right.
So now that we kind of you hinted a little bit about mobile vehicles. So how should controlled substances be handled for mobile vehicles? Can it just be kept in the glove box? Does it need to be can it just be thrown in the little front seat there?
It's funny, the glove box always, they're like, well, if the glove box is locked and the car is locked and it has an alarm, doesn't that fit the that double lock thing? And I'm like, well, technically, but let me show you how quickly we can break the window and then just pry that open. So look, we have a lot of different type of veterinarians that we work with that are mobile vets, whether they're euthanasia doctors, right, which seems to be the most that we work with lately, or just regular house call doctors, equine, which is we work with a lot, and regular, and then every other animal on the farm. They think about, right? So I was just with two of them. So the rules aren't any different. But what I want everyone to, the word I want everyone to realize or to remember is temporary storage. So, and I'll come back to that. But if you are going out in the field, the address of your registration is where those drugs are supposed to end up at the end of the day. But what happens if you're 200 miles that way and your house is only 50 miles coming back that way? You're not driving 200 miles back to the office just to drop off some drugs into the safe. So that's where temporary storage comes in, is that we need to have, another safe, at the location that we can call appropriate temporary storage, specifically if something happens that you can't get back to the hospital. And, it sounds stupid. Oh, no, DEA is not going to care, this and that. Well, we have had instances where people left their bag in the car and it was stolen because they were just tired. They came home, they left it, and then it disappeared. So even though you're keeping the drugs not at the address where they're supposed to be, I don't see any DEA person that would give you a hard time if you're like, look, I wasn't driving 200 miles back. I would probably killed myself. I'd be half asleep. They would go, okay, this is a gun safe, blah, 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 in my house, and put it this way. When I was an agent way back when, we had machine guns that we kept locked in our back of our car, but they had special locking mechanisms, no different than how DEA would expect the drugs go into some type of safe that's in your vehicle, whether it's hidden underneath. If you're an equine doctor, you probably have that big setup anyways built into the back of your truck, right? And those are great. You can secure, you can lock those, close everything down, and those are good to go. So it's not an issue. You just got to make sure that you have appropriate storage in your vehicle that you can lock the drugs into, because you might want to go you might need to go in somewhere, and you're not going to bring everything with you. And then also remember that when you're out and if you're doing a lot of work in the field, that's when you want to kind of do one bottle, one log sheet. I know we've talked about this, in the past, because that's where kind of bottle in, bottle out. If you're going back to, say, your office and you have an inventory clerk or someone you've got to pull a dispensary, we don't want anybody coming back and saying, hey, I need another bottle of this. Well, hand me your empty bottle with your log sheet, right? So that we can, we'll give you another bottle so you can go out. That's how we handle the equine medications, and I know that, one of the questions coming up is, I think about logbooks, right? I think that was something that we were going to talk about.
Yes.
Kind of rolls right into that one.
Yeah, exactly. So what can be, I guess we'll just skip ahead a little bit and switch places. But so what are some good examples of logbooks? Like what's acceptable? Like what are some things that, I think logbooks have like some of the biggest like myths about them, because it's like, oh, it has to be bound. It has to, has to.
Yeah. Well, that's what AHA wants you to think, right? It has to be bound. But the only thing that I could find is an official government logbook that has to be bound was an ATF logbook. It was the only thing that mentions of log books, right? So, and I remember many moons ago, an old grizzled DEA diversion investigator had told me, he goes, look, I don't care if the guy keeps everything on a napkin. If he's got everything written on that napkin and he can give it to me and it makes sense, hey, if it works for you, it works for you. So, and I swear to God, it was right before the pandemic. I went to a veterinary hospital and the guy handed me a box, and it was written on napkins. It was written on yellow stickies. It was written on everything, not a logbook, not one log sheet anywhere. He's like, I just keep my notes. He goes, I'm new to this world. I was a farm doctor for 30 years and hurt my back. And now I'm trying to keep making a living. And I bought this little practice. He really didn't understand the supply chain management of DEA, of drugs, of controlled substances. And, so that was, he was starting over at a very, not at a young age, and having to basically learn a new language.
Yeah.
If you think about it, because he had never done that. So, so logbooks can come just as human beings. They can come, giant, small, skinny, doesn't matter. What if you think about what your logbooks look like, right? Every column is there for a reason. The day, the drug, who gave that drug, the animal, the owner's name. Those are all very specific things that need to be in a logbook, right? And even if you create your own, if you use a 3-ring binder, because that's all you can afford, maybe you can't afford an automated dispensing machine, right? Because those are expensive. Maybe you can't afford those big, the AHA bundles, because, you're starting out, you're new, you don't have a lot of money, but you need to keep logbooks. Well, there's nothing saying you can't use a 3-ring binder and you can't make your own up, right? There's a million examples of logbooks on the internet that you could download and use.
Mm-hmm.
But for purposes of veterinary, of veterinary medicine, we certainly don't want to be using napkins, right?
Right.
We don't want to be keeping everything in a box, because although DEA has to accept what you hand them in a box, they're not walking away with a warm fuzzy in their stomach.
No.
You created an enemy, and logbooks have to tell a story. And they have to, and if you think about it, everything in your DEA compliance, everything you do is telling a story to the DEA investigator. You're telling them a story about who I am. I passed a background investigation. I was authorized by my doctor or doctors to work here. And when it comes to logging, even before the logging, right? What did I order? That story has to be told. And who ordered? Does the doctor know you ordered, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was explaining, I was telling Nicole earlier that I'm dealing with 6 pharmacy investigations where hundreds of thousands of pills were stolen. So you got to know who's working for you and who's placing those orders. So when it comes, to the end, when it comes to, to your logging, it tells the story, and that story has to follow everything before it and everything after it. So, and then if you make mistakes, if you have any issue that looks like it might turn into something that's looking like a pattern, right on the back of your logbook, diary, take notes, right? I mean, in my old life, we lived and died by our notes. I had surveillance notes. We had to write reports. All of that was important because 2 years from now, when DEA shows up and they're going through your logbooks and they ask you a question, well, you can go, oh, hold on, go to the back page. I have all my notes there, because they might be questioning about a 50 mil bottle of fentanyl that was dropped.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And you want to make sure that you can't remember that 2 years from now because maybe you will, maybe you won't, but your notes will bring that all back to life. Just like, our surveillance note brought back what happened on a specific day, what we had to do, especially if we were being called to court, to testify.
Yeah.
I don't remember what I did 10 years ago, but my notes will help me. Right.
Yeah.
So
it
that's
sounds
what
like
it's all about, telling a good story.
Yeah. So it sounds like for logbooks, it's much more important is what's actually in the logbooks versus what the actual logbook is.
Right. And correct. As long as we have the basics, the who, what, when, and where of logbooks, which is for everybody out there. If you're not using Nicole's or if you're using AHA, those are have both of those are very good examples of what you should have in a logbook. And of course, you could be using Imprimed, you could be using whatever your internal electronic logging system. You might be using VetSnap now. VetSnap's now in hundreds of hospitals, and that is a fantastic electronic logbook solution, right? And I've only been in this world for 6 years, and look at the changes.
Yeah.
For me that have happened in 6 years. We're in 2023 soon. If someone asked me, should everyone be using a regular logbook, or should everyone at this point be electronic? I think that we're getting close to being more towards everyone should be electronic, and that those solutions should be, very easy to use.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not, I don't want to talk bad about anybody's products, but when you can have electronic solutions out there that once things go wrong and once you just start to have tons of discrepancies and you're not managing those discrepancies, and you look back and you're like, oh my God, I've got 6 months of discrepancies on my Cubex machine. What do I do? Right. We've talked about that. You wake up one morning and you're like, how am I 6 months behind on all this stuff?
Yeah.
Then that become, and that if you're 6 months behind on that, you're certainly 6 months behind on a bunch of other stuff too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. So compliance and making sure that, we at least get to a baseline and we try and stay at that baseline. That's the most important thing you can do. When it comes to trying to manage a bunch of cats that could be running around,
herding cats and roping the wind.
Trying to herd those cats. Yeah. So
that makes total sense. So the other one that I hear all the time is the double lock on a safe.
Oh.
Does the safe really need to have a double lock or two locks on there?
So the short answer is no. You can have a gun safe that has a combination on it. You can have a safe that's just truly uses the fingerprints. They're out there now. You can put 1,000 fingerprints into them, and they're a little expensive. The double locked narcotic cabinets are really good if you want to only give access. You have to have one of the managers come up to actually, to open it up. It's like that double factor verification.
Mm-hmm.
But just because we have two keys, and if both keys are on the key ring, and you're carrying it around, that doesn't stop drug diversion at all, right? Person's just still going to open it up and get into it. So I've seen where they'll maybe the back stock for some reasons in a big double lock cabinet, and they'll keep one of the keys to it in a QB and a QBEX. So they're kind of hiding the one key for that, which is cool, right? I love, using a QB, as a way to safeguard a key, to something else. But no, double locked is absolutely not a requirement. What's a requirement is that it has to be substantially constructed and it has to be locked down. Now, I don't care if it's one sheetrock screw, holding it to the cabinet. At least you've tried, right? If you can't bolt, if you don't have a 400-pound safe, then you're going to have to bolt whatever you have to the wall, to a stud, to your cabinet. It has to be secure. Recently, almost every place I've went in, I was able to pick the safe up off the ground, and I could have walked out with it. So if I'm able to do that, DEA is going to, obviously they're going to walk in and see that, because remember, in today's world, DEA expects everyone to have safes. They expect to have that you understand what a substantially constructed something is. They expect you to have cameras, even though it's not something that is in the CFR. And they certainly expect you to have an alarm system, right? All of that I just talked about, I have been in places recently that didn't have either one or two or all three of those. So if something happens bad and then DEA shows up and and that's something you guys haven't done, I would say outside of the biennial inventory, which 90% of you guys haven't done, go out there and make sure your alarm system's working, that you have that and the time to test it's not when DEA shows up, right? And make sure that at least you've got some camera looking at your controlled substance cabinet or the treatment area where you guys are working at. It could be as easy as a Ring camera or whatever. It doesn't matter. DEA didn't put any restrictions on whether you spend $10,000 on the full, suite of cameras or you spend, $50 on some cameras.
Yeah.
As long as they work for you and they become a good tool, because they only work for us, if we have, at least 30 days worth of days of storage. So, give me a chance to come in and review some video of something that just happened, so maybe we can figure it out. Because a lot of times we'll go and they go, oh my God, it wasn't turned on. Or, oh, we only had it programmed for 7 days. I know I'm jumping ahead, but, or just going into, I just went into a whole nother security area off the safes, but it all comes together. Because remember, you're responsible for those 4 walls of the facility and everything that happens, within. And you have to decide as the DEA registrant, or, if you're working for them, what it is that at a minimum is going to secure those controlled substances, and that you can argue that fact to DEA that this system I had in and this storage and all this, I feel meets the requirements of the CFR. If you can't do it, of course, get somebody like us or somebody else out there that are security experts, that can help you. And that's one thing that, we pride ourselves on is we come from, at least I came from the security world in DEA. I was in charge of all security and personnel for the whole New York Field Division. So everything that I did protecting not just, the people inside the building, but all of the drugs that we seized, think of it as the drugs that that they have an event. Those had to be, recorded. We had to keep, we had to do inventories of those every year. So what DEA is putting on you guys is no different what they're putting on what's happening internally when it comes to just trying to deal with, inventorying and, a different set of controlled substances, mostly all Schedule 1, but still, the safety, the security that was put in place for storage of 1,000 kilos of cocaine in reality is really no different than the fentanyl that you guys are trying to secure in a vet clinic.
That literally just blew my mind. I never, never, ever even thought about like what happens to all that stuff that the DEA seizes. I don't know why
Yeah.
I never thought about that, but that just blew my
Goes
mind.
into a big warehouse, and then eventually in early in the morning, couple U-Haul trucks will show up. We load it up, and a bunch of heavily armed guys in cars with a bunch of machine guns follow that van out to Covanta's. There's a place called Covanta in Long Island that has a gigantic furnace, and that burns all the trash. And we sit there. They close everything. We walk in and we throw it all into this area, and they pick it up with these scoopers, and bye bye drugs.
Wild, wild,
Yep.
wild, wild. I never thought of
Well, you guys got to use a reverse distributor. We're just dumping them in a gigantic vat of fire.
Right, right. So, speaking of actually like waste or anything like that,
Mhm.
when is it acceptable to use a DEA Form 41 versus something like an RX destroyer if you have like waste or expired drugs or, like, I think there's a lot of like
Yes,
unclarity, like, yeah, around that.
gotcha. So we have to separate out administrative waste. So if you are doing a procedure and you've got a bunch of tubing, you've had a CRI going, all sorts of stuff. That's you pulled out 5 mils, but you only used 3. What do? I got to waste this. None of that will be recorded on the DEA 41 form. That's all going to be in your logbooks. That's where you're going to put that waste in your logbooks. Anytime you do in-house destruction, meaning that you've got medication that has expired, and we've gotten the approval to do in-house destruction using some drug buster, then that's we would fill out the 41 ourselves. We would take the inventory of what we're destroying, fill the 41 out, and then we file it. We keep it in-house. Okay. So we don't file that with DEA. We don't mail that into DEA. That form is to be presented to DEA, and when they come in to do an audit, they're going to ask, did you have any 41s for us to review? And you'll hand that to them. So the other way the 41 you'll interact with the 41 is if you had sent your drugs to a reverse distributor. They're going to fill the 41 out for you. They're actually going to send a copy to DEA and then send you back a copy. So 41 is used for in-house disposal by yourself, and a 41 will be sent to you by a reverse distributor after they destroy your drugs. That's the only time you use it. Don't use the 41 for all the administrative stuff. I'm glad you brought that up because I literally have seen that recently where that question is, about using the 41 for administrative stuff. And we got in trouble for it. Well, I didn't get in trouble for it, but a facility got in trouble for using a 41 for administrative waste. The DEA is like, this is an improper use of this form. This is a violation. And I went berserk. I'm like, it's not a violation because we used the form the wrong way. How's that a violation? And this is the other thing. This must have been the time of year where all the new DIs just came out of Quantico. This was a brand new diversion investigator. So something that should have taken 5 minutes took about 2 hours. And in the end, she was smashing us over the head for 2 pills. 2 pills that we couldn't find. And I kept saying, we probably dropped them. Maybe they were crushed. Maybe they came as a half pill. I go, there's many explanations outside of just saying you're not perfect. Where are the 2 pills? So, of course I laughed, because I just told you we were dealing with 104,000 pills
Right.
at the door, right? So to me, 2 pills is like, are you kidding me? So, but in the eyes of a brand new diversion investigator, oh my God, you're not perfect. How can you not account for all your medications? And this is someone who's never even seen the chaos of what can be going on inside of a vet hospital.
Yeah.
Right. When you're busy. I mean, it's a very, very challenging environment, specifically dealing with injectables, right? Forget pills. Pills are, pills are easy to count. That should never even been an issue unless we're off hundreds, right? And then that becomes another story. But one of the things that that is not really understood by DEA is the environment, is the veterinary environment. That's just something they're not used to,
Mm-hmm.
or they're not used to ever even doing many of them, and it's nothing to them. Everything now is becoming. There's a lot of AI involved, and DEA is looking at things. They're looking at veterinarians before, when they never had that availability to look at them, because now this is all because of the opioid epidemic, but new systems have been in place for tracking. So before, when they're tracking all of the purchases of C2s across the whole ethos of the supply chain, well, all of a sudden they're looking at veterinarians now where they never looked at them before. And and that's where patterns come in, and that's where their AI is looking at and this is what's important. If you are delegating that important part of your job, if you delegated the ordering and you're using a power of attorney and you think that that's great, they've got it, no, you still have to be on top of that, right? If you're not verifying every order, regardless, even if you have power. Look, in a hospital, power of attorneys are everywhere, and it's impossible for the CMO to be vetting every order. But there's certainly other layers of management involved that are going to want to know why you're ordering X.
Mm-hmm.
What have our par levels been? Why have we exceeded these par levels this month? For what reason? Because DEA is going to ask that question.
Yeah.
They're going to call, or your distributor is going to call you and say, hey, you guys have never ordered C2s before. Hey, doc, is that something you've just decided to do? What are you talking about? I don't even have 222 forms. So, that's another story to come.
Yeah.
It's too early to continue that story. But, so that's that in a nutshell.
Makes so much sense.
Yes.
So now, what do you think is one thing, like for everyone listening, what is one thing you wish every single person knew about controlled substance regulatory compliance? If you could share just like one message, what would it be?
Hold on. What is that? I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Well, you heard me harp at the beginning about the biennial inventory. I know that sounds just cheap, and it just sounds like nothing. But that is so important, because that gives us a starting point in a point in time, and it could be 2 years ago, but at least I know from there I have a shot at doing an audit, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have a shot at trying to figure out what happened here. Because if we don't have that one stupid form, DEA is already going to be judging us. You signed a contract, and I guess you really don't know what you're doing with that registration. So maybe this is a good time for you to hand it over to us.
Yeah.
Right. I've had that happen. You've heard me harp about that. Never give up your registration. Unless we have to, we'll fight tooth and nail to give up your registration. Maybe they're going to get it. They're going to do a show cause hearing, and they're going to get it because we really screwed up, but they're not going to get it today. And what that does is it allows you to stay in business. It allows you to keep working, and there's nothing they can do about it. It might take a few months, but at least for that month, we've been able to plan. You've been, you're still able to make, to make money.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And, if you lose your DEA registration today, no one has, a short-term plan in place other than having to hire another doctor to come in to be a registrant and to do all that. That's ungodly expensive, and it's not feasible. That can't be your business plan.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
That can't be your insurance policy.
No.
Right. So.
Yeah. And so speaking of biannual counts, a lot of times somebody will say like, oh, I just counted mine last week, but it's a biannual count isn't just like physically counting.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's so, it's the physical count, and then it's the form that goes with it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's the time of day you did it. And who, and did we have a witness, with us when we did, who was the witness when we did the counts, right? So If you just did a cycle count, now don't get me wrong, if you're doing a full cycle count once a month, meaning you're counting every single controlled substance you have on a specific day, yet you've never done a biennial inventory, we can recover from that because we'll take one of those counts and we'll slap a biennial form on there and we'll just pretend that we kind of know what we're doing. And DEA will go, oh, okay, but don't ever do that again because we had consistent counts.
Yeah.
Right? If you have no consistent counts and then they come in, like I said before, and they're looking at, because they're going to get frustrated that they can't do the audit, right? It becomes very difficult for them to figure at that point because we want to know what's been stolen, we want to know what's missing if that's what we're trying to figure out, and without good record keeping. Look, I can tell you this. I have another hospital case that we just settled. It was here in New Jersey, that the overall amount of pills that were missing was 300. Okay. The proposed fine was $5 million.
Oh my God.
Okay.
Okay.
What we negotiated it down to was 150,000, but it wasn't the 300 pills that got us. It was the horrible record keeping that DEA found once they came in. The record keeping was an absolute mess. So DEA went through, and then at that point they started. Every deficiency was a check mark, and each check mark was $15,000. Or $10,000. They went at 10,000. They went low, but that all added up to $5 million. The 222 form wasn't filled out correctly. They got every time they would get them on that. Of course, they didn't have the right biennial. It was everything. You guys can imagine the pile on, and then it becomes the pile on.
Yeah,
because DEA and the U.S. Attorney's Office, their mission now is to hurt people in the pocketbook. Sending out letters of admonition. And giving people chances. Well, that was all, second chances, third chances, whatever, in the middle of the opioid epidemic doesn't make them look good. So one of the things that, of course, $150,000 fine will hurt and maybe put most vet clinics out of business, independents, right? But that's the only way that DEA and the U.S. Attorney's Office was able to make the distributors feel pain.
Mm-hmm.
Was to really hammer them for billions of dollars. Still didn't put them out of business. They're still fat and happy, but they've also brought this fine, happy environment to every other industry that I'm working in. And I have a mom and pop grocery store chain out in Utah that I'm working with that we're going to trial. And I can't even tell you what the proposed fine is because it's going to blow everybody's mind. And it's in excess of $50 million. And I'm telling you, there is no gross crazy conduct. There were two situations that happened, and we don't have time to go over them because they're just too in depth. One was a pill mill doctor, and one was somebody passing forged and fake prescriptions over a period of time. But those are the only two things that they had. But then that was enough with the pile on that they pretty much have said, you're going to pay this big giant amount of money and we're going to probably put you out of the pharmacy business.
Yeah.
So that's a trial.
Yeah.
So we're literally, so you think about this, they've had to hire a big giant law firm. Of course, we're involved in it. And now I'm involved in it because I'm a witness because of everything that I've done to try and help them and due diligence and stuff that we put in place. And these are all things that, everybody should think about. Is we haven't even talked about. I know we've done all the myths and stuff like that. But if nobody's out there is really, if you hadn't had somebody come in and really stress your practice, right? Can you pass a DEA inspection? What does that feel like? And just the stress and tension is something you want to go through before DEA comes in, right? Because part of that exercise, as we both know, is how to respond to their questions and how to answer those questions, right? We certainly don't want the girls up front talking to the DEA guys, because they will say things that they're going to ask them questions because they want them to say, oh, well, no, we don't do that.
Yeah.
Or, yeah, we take back medications. When we let people bring all the medicine back to, things we don't want anyone, when DEA shows up, nobody talks to them except for the DEA registrant and whoever can make them very happy until, maybe the doctor gets back or to whatever's going to happen. That's if one thing I can get across of, we're not here to talk about how to survive a DEA inspection, but when they do show up, everybody should at that point zip. You don't have to talk to them unless you're the registrant. You can be very pleasant and say, I'd rather not be involved in this. But let the doctor, or if they allow the doctor with the lead vet tech or the inventory, let them do all the talking.
Yeah.
To the point that we have scripts now that we leave at the front desk for some of our larger places that have been hit so many times.
Oh, that's smart.
Right. That they pull, it's DEA, they pull the book out. This is what I'm supposed to say. And they read it.
Yeah.
That's all I want them to do. I don't want them saying anything else other than what's on the script.
Yeah.
So
makes so much sense.
Yes.
Well, Jack, I really appreciate your time, your expertise, your knowledge, your stories, all of it. I know. Can you believe it? So if people are like, okay, I'm like so stressed about my DEA compliance, I can't even see straight, or they just want a second set of eyes, where can they learn more about you, your services that you offer at Titan Group? How can they learn more about you and get in touch?
Okay. So the easiest thing is to go to our website, which is www.titangroupdea.com. That's you go there. We have a cool little tool on there that it's a risk assessment. You can go on and I think it's 6 or 7 questions, and unbelievably answer them truthfully, and we'll get a good score of the idea of where your state of DEA compliancy is. So, and if anybody has an absolute emergency, which we've had several lately, and you need to get a hold of somebody immediately, you can reach out to me direct. You can call me if you have to, 347-723-8019. I give that out, hoping that you guys realize that that's for real emergencies right now. Not just to ask me about, how do we do this? I get enough of those. We can handle that too for you. But and I always say that, in 2 days, something's going to happen when I do one of these things. And it just seems to inevitably, someone calls and goes, you're not going to believe this. Right. They showed up at my place.
And I will link all of your links to your website and to the assessment down below. And for all those listening, we are having a very fun webinar coming up. So go ahead, and I will, of course, send out all the information about that. So keep that on your noggin. And Jack, I really appreciate your time and your expertise. It was so much fun having you on the show.
You're welcome. I always enjoy having my times with Nicole.
I agree.
Yep. All right.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Inventory Nation podcast and spending your time with me. I know your time is valuable and in short supply, so it truly is an honor. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe or leave a review. Be sure to visit vetlogic.co/podcast to access the show notes and discover additional links and resources. See you next time.